Welcome to another riveting episode of Backstories You Didn't Ask For, the podcast where we dig into the weird, the wonderful, and the utterly unnecessary origins of the things you never knew you needed to know about. I'm your host, Jim Chase, and today we're diving deep into the wacky world of a toy that's likely still tangled up in your junk drawer. Yes, folks, we're talking about the Slinky. Buckle up, because this is going to be a wild, coiled ride down memory lane, with a few snarky detours along the way. Let's set the scene. It's 1943. The world is at war, and people are inventing all sorts of things to help the cause. But in the midst of all this global chaos, one naval engineer named Richard James is busy doing what all great inventors do, dropping things. Now, most of us drop something and think, great, now I have to pick that up. But Richard, oh no, he was a visionary. He knocked a tension spring off a shelf and watched it walk down a series of steps. Most of us would have thought, how neat, and moved on. But Richard, he thought, Eureka! I've discovered the next big thing, because when the world is at war, what we really need is a spring that can go downstairs. Richard, bless his heart, took this accidental discovery and saw dollar signs. He spent the next 2 years perfecting his little invention, making sure it could perform its now famous stair-walking trick. Can you imagine the conversations at the dinner table? Honey, what did you do today? Oh, just trying to make sure my metal coil can walk down the stairs without falling over. And yet, here we are. By 1945, Richard and his wife Betty were ready to unleash this metal marvel onto the world. The Jameses borrowed $500, about the cost of a decent used car back then, to manufacture a batch of 400 Slinkies. They debuted their toy at Gimbel's department store in Philadelphia and sold it in about 90 minutes. That's right, people were tripping over themselves to buy a metal spring. I guess when you're dealing with war rationing, your entertainment options are pretty limited. But seriously, folks, it was a simpler time. This was before we had the internet to distract us with cat videos and endless memes. With the initial success in hand, the Jameses founded James Industries and started cranking out Slinkies like they were going out of style. And believe me, nothing says post-war American ingenuity like mass-producing a toy that does exactly one thing. But hey, people loved it. By the late 1940s, the Slinky had become a nationwide phenomenon. Kids were mesmerized, and parents were probably just happy their children were entertained by something other than playing with sticks and rocks. Now let's talk about the real hero of our story, Betty James. While Richard was busy dreaming up his metal monstrosity, Betty was the one who saw its true potential. After Richard had his midlife crisis and ran off to join a Bolivian cult in 1960, yeah, you heard that right, Betty took over the company and turned the Slinky into an American icon. She expanded the product line, introduced new colors, and even ventured into plastic Slinkies. She kept the business afloat and made sure the Slinky remained a staple of childhoods everywhere. Betty James, ladies and gentlemen, the real MVP. But let's rewind a bit. Back in 1962, the Slinky launched one of the most memorable advertising jingles of all time. If you don't know it, where have you been? It's Slinky, for fun, it's a wonderful toy. It's Slinky, it's fun for a boy and a girl, and maybe another boy. Oh, it's so stuck in my head. Pure poetry, right? Move over, Shakespeare, because we've got a new wordsmith in town. This jingle was so catchy that it probably still stuck in the heads of anyone who was alive during the time. I mean, they don't write them like that anymore, and thank goodness for that. So what exactly makes a Slinky so fascinating? Is it the simplicity? The fact that it's essentially a toy that's spun to break? Or maybe it's the sheer audacity of turning a spring into a multi-million-dollar business? Whatever it is, the Slinky has endured. It's been featured in movies, used in classrooms to teach physics, and even sent to space. That's right, folks. NASA took Slinkies to space because when you're floating around in zero gravity, why not see if a spring can still do its thing? In the decades since its creation, Slinky has become more than just a toy. It's a piece of Americana, a symbol of ingenuity, and a reminder that sometimes the simplest ideas are the best ideas, or at least the most profitable ones. And it wasn't just limited to the metal coil. We got Slinky dogs, Slinky trains, and Slinky everything. It was like Oprah up in here. You get a Slinky, and you get a Slinky, and you get a Slinky. But let's not forget the darker side of the Slinky saga. After Richard James took his unexpected spiritual detour, Betty had to pick up the pieces. She didn't just keep the company going, she thrived. She's the one who decided to take the Slinky plastic, to market it in different colors, and to push it as an educational tool. Betty took a wobbly toy and turned it into an empire. She's proof that behind every great man is a woman rolling her eyes and cleaning up his mess. And speaking of messes, let's address the elephant in the room, the tangled Slinky. Oh yes, if you've ever owned a Slinky, you know the heartbreak of that first tangle. It's like watching a piece of your childhood die in front of you. You spend hours trying to untangle it, twisting and turning, only to make it worse. It's a rite of passage, really. The Slinky is the perfect metaphor for life. It's fun and mesmerizing until it all goes horribly wrong. Despite the occasional heartbreak, the Slinky remains a beloved toy. It's cheap, it's simple, and it's endlessly entertaining. It's been inducted to the National Toy Hall of Fame, and it even has its own holiday. That's August 30th, in case you're wondering. Yes, Slinky Day is a thing, because if there's one thing we need more of, it's holidays dedicated to inanimate objects. Today, the Slinky is still going strong, proving that even in the world of high-tech gadgets and gizmos, there's still a room for a simple metal coil. It's a reminder that sometimes the best things in life are simple, and also that sometimes the best ideas come from dropping things on the floor. Now, before you think the Slinky is just some relic of the past, let me remind you that it's still a big deal today. Just take a look at how many modern innovations are basically Slinkies in disguise. Ever see those fancy kinetic desk toys that claim to relieve stress? Yeah, they're just overpriced Slinkies with a marketing budget. Or how about those collapsible phone grips everybody's slapping on their smartphones? You're essentially paying for a mini Slinky that doesn't even get to show off its stair-walking prowess. And let's not forget about the Slinky's international fame. This little American coil has crossed borders and won hearts worldwide. In Japan, it's known as mouse roll, probably because they wisely avoided naming it after a spring-like characteristics. In France, they call it the magic spring. Everywhere it goes, it brings the same mix of fascination and frustration, because no matter what language you speak, untangling a Slinky is a universal struggle. But we'd be remiss not to talk about the cultural impact of Slinky beyond just being a toy. This thing is a legit pop culture icon. It's made appearances in films like Toy Story, where Slinky Dog became a beloved character. It's also been used in music videos and even appeared on TV shows. Remember Ace Ventura: Pet Detective? Jim Carrey's character used a Slinky to descend a massive flight of stairs, and it was cinematic gold. Who knew a simple coil of metal could steal the show from one of Hollywood's biggest comedians? Now, if you think the Slinky is just for kids, think again. Adults have found some pretty creative uses for it too. It's been used in art installations, do-it-yourself projects, and even as a musical instrument. Yeah, you heard me right. Some avant-garde musicians have turned Slinkies into percussion instruments, creating ethereal sounds that would make any music snob nod in approval. So the next time you get to see a Slinky, don't just think of it as a toy. Think of it as a versatile tool of artistic expression, or at least a fun way to annoy your pets. And let's end on a note of entrepreneurial inspiration. The story of the Slinky is a testament to the power of persistence and creativity. Richard James turned a simple mistake into a multi-million-dollar empire, and Betty James took the reins and expanded it even further. It's a classic underdog story that reminds us that sometimes the most unassuming inventions can have the biggest impact. So whether you're an aspiring inventor, artist, or just someone looking to make a quick buck, remember the Slinky's journey. Because if a metal coil can become a household name, who knows what the next big idea can be? That's all for today's extra long, extra snarky episode of Backstories You Didn't Ask For. I'm Jim Chase, and I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of the Slinky. Tune in next time for more tales of the weird, the wonderful, and the completely unnecessary. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review, unless you're one of those people who likes to leave one-star reviews because your life is devoid of joy. See you next time, folks. This episode was brought to you by, well, still no one yet. But if you're interested in sponsoring a podcast that dives into the ridiculous and the sublime, reach out. We're always looking for partners in crime. Until next time, keep it snarky.